You think the woods go quiet at night, but that's a lie. Out here, under the trees, things wake up that don't belong in daylight, shadows that move without wind, footsteps that stop when you listen, smiles, in places where faces shouldn't be. Tonight, I'll give you 3 tales from the campfire, each one true enough to keep you looking over your shoulder. First, the man at the edge of the firelight, a visitor who never stepped closer, yet never left. Then, the lantern in the fog, where light calls you deeper and you don't come back. And finally, trail marker 13, the path that swallows the ones who walk it twice. Get comfortable, but don't close your eyes. The forest never sleeps. Some people don't step into the light because they were never meant to. The fire was the only thing keeping the night at bay. We were far from the nearest road, deep in the kind of woods that swallows sound. It was the last night of our trip, and the 4 of us, me, Danny, Chloe, and Rob, sat huddled close, letting the flames do their work against the creeping cold. It was quiet, except for the occasional pop from the logs. Too quiet. Danny noticed it first. "Do you see that?" he whispered. At the very edge of the firelight, just outside the ring where the shadows begin, stood a man. He was tall, still, and utterly silent. His face was hidden beneath the brim of an old, weather-worn hat. We froze. "Hello?" Rob called out, but the man didn't answer, didn't move. It was Chloe who reached for the flashlight. She clicked it on and aimed it right at him. The beam should have lit him up, but it didn't. The light just stopped, like it was hitting a wall of fog. Danny stood. "I'm going to tell him to leave," he said, but I grabbed his arm. Something in my gut screamed that this was wrong. Then the man tilted his head, just slightly, like he was studying us. That's when we heard it. A low, steady breathing, coming from everywhere at once. Chloe dropped the flashlight. The beam spun wildly before dying, the batteries suddenly dead. The man stepped closer, not walking, not moving his legs at all, just closer. We all backed toward the tents. Rob was muttering under his breath, saying it was some prank, some weirdo who'd followed us out here. But the way he said it sounded like he was trying to convince himself. The man stopped again, now just a few feet from the fire. And then he smiled. It wasn't the kind of smile people give. It was stretched too wide, too perfect, like it had been drawn onto his face. The fire began to dim. Not fade, dim, like something was sucking the light out of it. That's when we heard another sound. Footsteps. From behind us. We spun around, and there he was. The same man. Hat. Smile. Watching. I looked back at the fire, and he was still there too. 2 of him. Danny swore under his breath. Chloe started crying. Rob just kept shaking his head, muttering, "No, no, no." The fire sputtered out completely, and the woods swallowed us in black. We couldn't see them, but we could hear the breathing. Closer now, surrounding us. I fumbled for my phone, desperate for any light, but the screen stayed black, unresponsive. And then, hands. Cold, impossibly strong, gripping my shoulders. A voice, deep and gravelly, whispered right against my ear. "You shouldn't see me twice." I was shoved forward into nothingness. When I opened my eyes, it was morning. The campsite was empty. No tents, no fire pit, no sign we had ever been there. The only thing left was my phone, lying in the dirt, screen cracked. When I turned it on, there was one photo in the gallery. A picture of me, sleeping, taken from just beyond the firelight. The fire burned low, And just beyond the smoke, something moved. No footsteps, no breath, only a light swaying in the fog, waiting for you to follow. By the time you hear the bell, it's already too late. The fog rolled in fast that night. Thick, wet, and heavy, it smothered the forest like a damp blanket. We were 5 miles deep into the state park, tents pitched beside a crooked little stream. The air smelled like wet pine and decaying leaves, and everything felt still. We were a group of 5. Me, my best friend Eric, his sister Maya, her boyfriend Joel, and the quiet one, Ben. Ben didn't say much, but he was the one who had suggested this camping trip in the first place. At first, the fog didn't bother us. We sat around the fire, telling stories and roasting marshmallows, pretending not to hear the distant creaks and snaps from the woods. But then the wind died completely, and that silence settled in, the kind that makes you whisper without realizing it. That's when we saw it. A faint orange glow moving between the trees. It wasn't a flashlight. The light flickered like flame, swaying back and forth. Eric swore it was just a hiker, maybe a park ranger. But the glow was too steady, too deliberate. And then came the sound. A bell. Soft at first, like the chime of an old shop door, but it grew louder, closer, until it was echoing in our bones. Ben stood up. "They found us," he said. It was the first full sentence I'd heard from him all trip. We asked what he meant, but he just grabbed his bag and started walking toward the light. We followed because, well, you don't just let your friend wander into the fog alone. The deeper we went, the harder it was to see. The trees were just dark pillars fading into nothing, the ground slick under our boots. The light stayed ahead of us, always just far enough that we couldn't see who or what was carrying it. "Ben!" Eric yelled, but his voice was swallowed by the fog. The bell rang again. This time, I swear it was inside my head. When we finally caught up, Ben was standing perfectly still in a small clearing. The lantern hung from a crooked post in the center, swinging slightly. No one was holding it. Maya asked if he was okay. He didn't answer. Then Joel stepped forward. "It's just an old trail marker," he said, reaching for the lantern. The moment his hand touched it, the fog thickened so much I couldn't see my own feet. The bell blared, impossibly loud, and I swear I heard whispers inside it. When the fog thinned, Joel was gone. Just gone. Ben turned to us slowly. His eyes were glazed, his lips moving without sound. Then, in the quietest voice, he said, "We have to leave an offering." Before I could ask what he meant, he unzipped his backpack and pulled out a small wooden box. It was old, really old, covered in symbols I didn't recognize. He placed it at the base of the lantern post and stepped back. The bell rang again, softer this time. And then Joel came back. Only it wasn't him. His skin was too pale, his eyes too dark, and when he smiled it was all wrong. Too wide, too many teeth. "Let's get back to camp," he said, voice calm and steady. We walked in silence, following Joel through the fog. The fire at camp was still burning, but the tents looked different somehow. Older, weather-beaten. And when we got there, we saw them. 5 figures sitting around the fire. 5 of us, laughing, talking, eating marshmallows, like we'd never left. Joel didn't stop walking. He went right up to his other self, sat down, and stared into the flames. Ben whispered, "It's too late now." The bell rang one final time, and the fog swallowed everything. The lantern went dark. but the path remained. Only now, every turn led you deeper until you stood before trail marker 13, where the woods decide if you leave. By the time they saw the number, it was already too late. The hike was supposed to be simple. 4 friends, Ryan, Melissa, James, and Tara, meeting up after months apart. One last summer trip before adulthood swallowed them whole. The trail was well marked, maintained by the state park, with wooden posts numbered in bright yellow to reassure hikers they were never too far from a ranger station. Ryan had found the loop online. 6 miles, easy, he'd said. Trail markers every quarter mile. We can't get lost. The air smelled of pine and damp earth. Sunlight cut through the canopy in shifting blades of gold. They laughed, took selfies, and pointed out odd-shaped clouds drifting between the leaves. They passed marker 4, then 7, then 9, and then marker 13. Melissa stopped mid-step. That's weird. There's no 13 on the map. It goes 12, then loops back toward the parking lot. The post was old, much older than the others. The wood was gray and splintered, the numbers carved deep instead of painted. Moss grew over half the surface like it had been there for decades. Probably just some prank, James said, brushing past. But when they looked around, the trail didn't look right. The dirt path narrowed, the trees leaned in tighter, and the air felt heavier, wetter, like breathing through damp cloth. Ryan suggested turning back. They retraced their steps for 20 minutes, but somehow, the next marker they found was 14. They laughed nervously. Maybe the park had updated the trail. Maybe they missed a turn. But every direction they took, every split they followed, brought them to the same path. The deeper they walked, the quieter the woods became. No birds, no wind, no crunch of twigs underfoot. Just the faint sound of water dripping somewhere unseen. When they stopped to rest, Melissa noticed something strange about the trail markers. Each one they passed, 15, 16, 17, had their names carved faintly into the wood. First Ryan, then Tara, then James. When they reached marker 18, Melissa's name was carved into it. The air felt colder now. Shadows stretched unnaturally long, bending in directions the light didn't match. "Who's doing this?" Tara demanded. Her voice shook, but no one answered. They walked faster. The path began to slope downward into darker, older forest where the trees looked petrified, frozen mid-scream, their branches like twisted fingers. Marker 19 stood ahead, but there was no number on it, just a single word burned into the surface: stay. Ryan laughed nervously. "Yeah, no, we're leaving." But they didn't. They couldn't. No matter how far they walked, the next marker was always there, just out of sight, pulling them forward like a lure in deep water. By marker 22, the forest floor was soft, too soft. James took a step and sank ankle deep into the ground. The smell hit them next. Rot, sweet and sickening. Something pale jutted out of the soil. Melissa bent to brush it off, thinking it was a rock. It was a human jawbone. They ran. Branches lashed at their faces, roots snagged their shoes, but they didn't stop until they burst into a small clearing, marker 13 standing in the center. Only it wasn't the same post they'd seen before. This one was split down the middle, blackened, the wood still smelling faintly of burnt flesh, and hanging from rusty nails on either side were 4 sets of hiking boots. Their hiking boots. Melissa stumbled backward and realized something that made her blood ice over. Their own footprints led into the clearing, but there were no footprints leading out. Ryan turned to run, but the forest shifted, the trees closing in like a trap. A voice spoke, not from the shadows, but from the wood of the post itself, a low, creaking whisper. "Keep walking." They screamed and bolted down the only opening left. The trail seemed endless, twisting and folding back on itself. The numbers on the markers grew higher, 30, 41, 58, until they stopped being numbers at all. The symbols became jagged scratches, each one more desperate than the last. When Ryan collapsed, gasping for breath, Melissa turned to help him and froze. He was smiling. Wide, too wide. His eyes were black and glassy, like water pooled in shadow. In a voice that wasn't his, he whispered, "Almost there." The others backed away, but one by one they began to smile too, their eyes turning the same inky black. Melissa was the last. She ran until her legs gave out, until the trees blurred, until her vision swam. And when she fell, she landed at the base of a familiar post. Marker 13. The carving was fresh this time. Her name was already there. 3 stories, 3 warnings. And yet, you're still here, staring into the dark. The man at the fire's edge is still watching. The lantern in the fog still sways. And trail marker 13 still waits for another wanderer. Out here, the woods keep what they're given. So if you came to leave with all your pieces, you should have turned back long ago. But you didn't, did you? I hope you can sleep through the night.